It's been more than 100 days since Michael Brown was killed. The grand jury made its decision, no charges against the officer who shot him, but calls for justice continue. Is this now a movement, a moment in history that will forever change our city, our country? Or have protesters worn out their welcome, even damaged our community? Do we have to rise above the arsonist and the racist among us? Or is there some ugliness in all of us that we have to address? This is bigger than Ferguson. So tonight, what next? What now? Stay tuned.
And on Stay Tuned, you drive the discussion. We bring local experts, journalists, and civic leaders together to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Tweet us your insights on tonight's topic, and you've got a seat at the table. With a few national experts and a panel of community members, this is the show bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. So stay tuned.
So tonight we have a leader of the protest movement, former county police chief Charlie Brennan is here from Donnybrook, and we've also got other members of the community here to have some hopefully very honest and real conversations. But first, Jim Kircher sets the table.
The evidence was presented in an organized...
After this, the announcement of no indictment. And after this, the angry response, the destruction shown around the world. What now?
I can't explain it right now. I cannot. I'm for both sides. I am. I'm for both sides.
There was a hope that it wouldn't come to this, but there was also the awareness that it might, and that if it did, maybe we could put the worst of it behind us fast, and then figure out what was ahead.
No Black Friday!
There were also the protesters who took to the stores and the shopping malls over the holiday weekend to make sure that if you wanted to think this was over, they were there to say it was not. But it raises the question, what's this all about? For some, it is still about justice for Michael Brown, punishment for Officer Wilson, who has resigned, and there is still a federal investigation. For others, though, it's now more about the issues that have simmered for years and erupted after the shooting. That's what the governor's Ferguson Commission is supposed to be dealing with. And on Monday, they met for the first time. 2 members were in Washington, D.C., meeting with the President of the United States. That's how big this thing is. But this meeting still had to start out with routine business, introductions, guidelines for operations. People were asked to write down their concerns, their hopes for the commission, and to post them on the wall. But later, here too, the emotions would boil over as some in the audience lost patience and loudly voiced their anger, their concerns, and doubts about this commission. How do you make this commission different than just another good public relations move for a lot of people?
Yeah. First of all, we've got to take action where there's opportunity. So I think if we wait until September 15th to submit a report, then we would have not fulfilled the expectations of a community that needs someone to steward some positive change.
So when the legislature goes into session in January, there's going to be something in that session probably before them?
Well, certainly items for them to consider, and we hope act vigorously on during this session. And we will be asking for them to take a look at several issues that require changes in state statute, but other things may come from executive action. Some things may come from the community and community organizations in the not-for-profit world, because this is a community-wide problem. We regard this as a commission for the region. We regard ourselves as responsible to the region, and the need for the region to engage with the commission thoughtfully.
It's a whole lot to be done. I mean, a whole lot to be done now.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, so a real conversation about what people are saying, what they're thinking, what they're trying to say. Let me do introductions here. Welcome back to the show, former St. Louis County Police Chief Tim Fitch. Thanks for being here. Brittany Packnett, welcome back to the show as well. There may not be an actual individual who leads the protest movement, but you're an ally of the protest movement, and you're also on the Ferguson Commission, and host of Donnybrook, KMOX, Charlie Brennan. Thanks to all of you for being here. Brittany, as an ally of the protest movement, I've seen you out there on the front lines several times. What are the protests about now? Is this about education, economic disparities? Is this about Mike Brown?
Yeah. I would say ultimately I'm an ally of the children that we serve at Teach for America St. Louis. And so all of those children are growing up in low-income communities. Most of them are children of color or first-generation Americans. And so we know that systemic injustices much more disproportionately affect them. So inadequate education, inadequate housing, inadequate employment, and difficulties with policing and distrust in communities highly affects them. And so me being out there is really to support them and their voices and make sure that they're heard. And I would say ultimately, right, there was a cause that brought us all out here, but we recognize that all of those injustices that I just talked about are deeply interconnected, and that we have to pay attention to all of them, right? So we have to pay special attention to how we police our communities and how we make everyone feel safe, including our children of color. But we also have to look at the things that have been happening in our communities for decades, centuries even, to make sure that we're solving long-term problems as well.
So what is the goal when a group of protesters march through a mall on Black Friday?
Well, I would say it's to ensure that apathy doesn't take over this movement, right? That we actually recognize what President Obama said yesterday in response to Eric Garner's death and the failure to indict the officer that choked him to death, that this is an American problem. If everyone doesn't have access to the American dream, then we're not living up to our ideals. If one of us is not free, none of us are free, right? Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so bringing that conversation to everyone is what these young leaders and protesters have been wanting to do.
I think I agree that housing, education, feeling secure, being able to raise your family in a safe and environment where you make some money and all that, those are all great goals. I think that the question you have, Casey, though, what does walking through a mall, how does that enhance it? That's a good question. And at some point, things are going to turn if they haven't already. You might make more enemies than you get followers if it goes on ad nauseum. Last week, Senator John Danforth said, okay, what can we do? How do we turn this into strategy so that if you do have concerns about the level of minority participation in police departments, or if it's housing or if it's education, let's sit down and figure out what exactly we have to do to make that happen so the world's a better place for everybody, as opposed to slowing business down, hurting profits and revenues, which ends up in layoffs, people out of work, people can't get to their jobs, people might go out of business, as some of them have in Ferguson already.
Well, we could have said the same thing about those Greensboro college students who sat at that Woolworths counter, right? That they slowed business down, that they disrupted things, but it was necessary to address those injustices. And we actually were just able to see a special screening of the film Selma that will be coming out about that legendary Bloody Sunday, that march on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. And one of the things that really struck me about that was that Dr. Martin Luther King went to the White House. He worked on strategy. He made sure that there was a policy angle to this thing to make systemic change. But he also went back out into the streets to make sure that people did not forget the injustices that they were protesting.
I can see protesting a lunch counter if that lunch counter is segregated. Absolutely target that business. But many of the businesses targeted, in fact, many of them in Ferguson that were burned down, for example, are owned by minorities. Many of these businesses have nothing to do with injustices whatsoever. In fact, they're employing people who are of color, they're owned by people who are of color, and I'm just not sure it's really productive to the cause.
I think we have to be careful to remember that the vast majority of the protests over the last 119 days have been completely peaceful.
But do you worry that most people might not see it that way? If you're doing something that disrupts their lives, if you're now kind of in their backyard, so to speak, and they also have seen the images on TV of things burning, that might seem like the very same thing to a lot of people. Do you worry about that?
Of course we worry about it, but I think that's the reason why conversations like these are so important, to make sure that the truth is visible to everyone, and that we recognize that when a couple of bad things happen, that does not actually color an entire movement. During one of the mall shutdowns on Black Friday, I actually got to hear from a store owner who had to close his doors, and he said, you know what, this is America, and if I have to close my doors for 15 minutes for you to express your First Amendment rights, I'm okay with that.
And I'd have to agree with you about you can't color it all. This is the entire movement. And it's the same way in policing, is we've all of a sudden leapt to One of the state senators tweeted last night, has the KKK infiltrated American policing? I don't know if you got to see that out there, from a Missouri state senator. Now, what would make her think that? What would make her think that that's the case? Because of these two cases? So there's 800,000 police officers in this country, and there's two very, very focal points right now with the New York case and the Ferguson case. That's not how policing's done every day in America. But everybody's being painted with this broad brush right now in the police world.
And I think the protesters are doing that. I mean, I saw them in Clayton yelling the N-word at African-American police officers as they protected the Buzz Westfall Justice Center. No protesters were telling them to stop it. And apparently at Hazelwood East, the students were doing the same thing with the F-word, the N-word, taking on police officers and labeling all the police officers if they were all guilty of some sort of crime.
So I would be very careful, right, that if we're not going to paint police officers with one broad brush, and I would agree that we should not. We should also not say they, right, and the protesters' language is very important.
I'm seeing them. I'm seeing it.
And I am as well, but I also think that we have to recognize that in this moment, there is a lot of pent-up frustration that has been happening for decades, right? For people's entire lifetimes, they've been dealing with these injustices. And so sometimes that can bubble over in ways that we might not always like, but are very real. So I think what is incumbent upon us is to not just talk about how we calm the current vitriol down, but how we actually get to the root causes that are making people this angry. We can talk about stopping people from saying certain things on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, but we really need to be talking about how we change things for years to come.
I think I mentioned that. Let's get the piece of paper out and I think you're doing that with the Ferguson Commission.
Certainly.
Let's have a strategy. What do we want to do? What's our goal? How do we get there? Shutting down some guy's business in Ferguson or West Florissant, South Florissant, I don't think that gets us there.
You also need, I would argue, or I would ask, broad public support for major systemic changes. Let's look at the Business Journal had a poll. I think it's worth noting, pointing out, not scientific, but I believe the Business Journal asked people's opinion on the grand jury decision. 71% these are Business Journal readers say that they got it right. I know the protesters don't feel that way. Do people that you talk to feel that way, Chief?
Well, you know, in every police officer out there working today, which my son is a 23-year-old young police officer, are questioning their decision to enter law enforcement as a career now because of this. They have basically said, you know what, maybe it's better I just answer my radio calls and go to home every night instead of doing proactive police work. How many police officers today do you think would be willing to approach 4 individuals at the back of a closed business at 2 in the morning and say, what are you doing back here? Because it could turn ugly. And they would be the next Darren Wilson. That's every police officer's biggest fear out there, is they don't want to be the next Darren Wilson. One way to make sure that doesn't happen is stop doing policing. And we've seen that in this country. I saw it personally in Cincinnati when I did their CALEA accreditation inspection. I went to Cincinnati. I talked to the Federal Monitor. I talked to the police officers. I did ride-alongs in Over the Rhine in Cincinnati. And they said after the federal government came in and took over the police department, we stopped doing police work, and crime went up by huge margins. Now, since it's gone back down, like most of the country, most crime has gone back down. I predict, we're just starting to see the beginning of this, is you're going to see crime increase in the urban areas, in particular in this country, from here on out. It's not going to stop for a while.
I don't think that it has to be an either or, right? And I know that law enforcement and community members and on the Ferguson Commission, we've already been talking about how to really engage in community policing. I understand the poll and I understand people's opinions, but there are some statistical facts that popular opinion can't change. And so we know that between 2010 and 2012, when you compare 15 to 19-year-old black youths and white youths, almost 2 in 1 million are killed by police officers if you're white, and it's almost 32 if you're black.
But is it because the African American individuals are suspects of crimes? Is that why? Is that why the number is higher? You can't just say they're targeting African Americans.
Well, if I could finish my point, right? There are also is research that shows us that there is unconscious bias is the word that I'm trying to use. Unconscious bias on the behalf of everyone, right? And that when you talk about putting people and giving people the level of responsibility where they are carrying a gun in a community, then there is a high standard that those folks should be held to, right? And so if we see those disproportionalities occurring, then we have a responsibility to investigate that and to hold people accountable.
That's high standards for sure.
We've also seen statistics too where the white population in a particular community commits more crimes, even though the black community may be stopped more frequently.
Precisely.
And that's not
Ferguson.
and not just here. I know USA Today did some work across the country.
But let's get real. In St. Louis, homicide, for example, I mean, that's a crime that is largely committed by young African-American males. And, you know, as a police officer dealing with that, it's very difficult. How many police officers, Chief, have been shot at since August the 8th in St. Louis?
Since Michael Brown died, there's been 5 law enforcement officers within 8 miles of Ferguson that have been shot, not shot at.
Yeah.
We're not counting those.
I mean, that's the reality we're dealing with right now. And to what extent does that ruin life's prospects for the young African American in St. Louis?
Absolutely, I would agree with you. But there is a foundation to those problems that have to go back to those systemic injustices that I started with. When we look at unequal education, when we look at unequal employment, there is a reason why people are going and making some unfortunate choices because of that lack.
Well,
and so we have to pay attention to long-term systemic
why is
solutions.
that the police fault,
in order, I didn't say it was
no,
the
I'm
police
just saying
fault.
that the police are getting the blame for most of this problem right now. Pretty much, this started way before Mike Brown, way before Mike Brown.
Well, I would say that talking to several of my friends, several of the students that I serve, several of the young people that I've had the privilege to get to know over these last 119 days, that the problem people are really identifying, and sometimes they might not have the words to articulate, but the problem people are really identifying is a culture of distrust that people really do want to see healed. And so the question is, again, how do we get after those long-term solutions so that systemic injustice doesn't bring us to this point once again?
Will the Ferguson Commission be able to do that? I've actually heard from protesters who feel like the Ferguson Commission, on which you sit, is just to make them be quiet. It's just to placate them.
Well,
are you confident in the authority or the power the Ferguson Commission may have?
You know, I really believe in the people involved. I believe in Rich McClure. I believe in Starsky Wilson. I believe in so many of the diverse people that we have from all walks of life that have come together in order to try to make real sustainable change. But we need the community in order to make that happen. We can't move forward on anything unless the community says, this is what I want to see worked on, and these are the kinds of solutions that I have in mind. And so we're still continuing to work out the process. We're still refining things so that we can listen intently and so that we can make long-term choices and recommendations to this state to move forward.
Back to where we kind of started the conversation, you need the community to. Will you have the community if the protests continue?
I mean, I think that's about doing the everyday work of having tough conversations like we've just been having, right? And so operating with a lot of honesty and operating with transparency and also operating with care for people, right? We're all just people trying to live in an equal and just society.
Is there a gap? I'm sorry, Chief. Charlie, I'm just thinking of the people you talk to on a daily basis on the radio. How wide is the gap between what the protesters want in the purest form and what people might be taking from the message?
Well, I'm not exactly sure exactly what the protesters want. I'm not sure that's clear yet because the terms are, pretty broad. I think even, as you mentioned, Brittany, we're still kind of listening at this stage. But I think there's a big gulf, to answer your question, between people who I hear from. I mean, from all sides, both sides, up and down, black and white. I think that I think St. Louis is far apart on a lot of these issues right now.
Are we worse than we were on August the 8th? Are we more divided now?
I think so. And I'll say, I think it's a bad situation. I think that right now you're going to find people aren't going to come here for college. People aren't going to move businesses here. People aren't going to accept transfers here. I think that a lot of people in North County will be moving to St. Charles.
Or is the other way to look at this that we have the chance to lead the nation on a problem that any city would be foolish to think they don't have?
I think we have to look at it with that level of opportunity, right? I think there's a question as to whether or not we are more divided today or if we were always perhaps this divided and this actually just brought certain latent things to the surface. But we have to look at this with eyes of hope and with the view of an opportunity to say we can lead the nation, we can have the tough conversations, we can heal that rift so that we can come together, law enforcement and community members, to actually create a safer, better place for our children to live and learn.
We want to wrap in just a second on this particular conversation, but I would be remiss if I didn't say, any other time we might do a whole show that you just met the president this week. Can you give us your impressions?
I mean, it was an incredible privilege to go and represent our children, right? When we talk about low-income children of color, not a lot of people ask how they're doing and what they need. And so that was the responsibility that I feel like I walked in there with. That was actually the 59th anniversary of Rosa Parks being arrested, sitting down on that bus. And so thinking about my ancestors, thinking about the people, the freedom fighters that came before us, and thinking about the children that have been looking up to me saying, am I next? And I just want to learn, I just want to be great. Making sure that I relayed that message to the president was of primary importance to me. So it was an incredible opportunity, but it was certainly one with a lot of responsibility.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Charlie. If you all stick around, we'll bring you back in just a few minutes. But first, as we've kind of touched on here, you can be friends, you can be neighbors, and you can see this very differently. Here's Jim Kircher again.
You talk about. I mean, Art and I disagree on this.
Emery Castellut and Art Perry are friends. They're neighbors in the same Central West End building, and they don't always agree.
Our thoughts and backgrounds provide different perspectives on it.
Art grew up in North St. Louis.
But I'm aware of the hostility that's there, yes.
Emery's family moved out of the city of Detroit, and he grew up in the suburbs.
Were shaped by what I saw around me, which was obviously different than what Art was experiencing growing up right in the middle of the city. What is it that caused Michael Brown, if he in fact assaulted the officer, physically assaulted him and attempted to secure his weapon, what would cause a citizen to do that to a law enforcement officer other than self-defense? I don't find an explanation for that, because if we
This
don't
is not
have...
neatly tied up in a package for you, is it?
It is not tied up in a package, and I think that question, I hope that question gets developed and says, what was it about this young man, or where he was raised, or how he was raised, or how he learned that he would react physically that way?
Both these men were less than 30, each of them physically fit. And when one approaches another and it's not in a favorable manner, the other is going to react. And at that time, we have mano a mano. And when you have black and white, then it even escalates further.
He graduated from high school and he was 3 days away from going to technical college. He's a success story, my guess is, in his neighborhood from that context. So what was his beef? Why would you throw that away by taking the risk, which in his case turned out to be a tragedy, of, assaulting a police officer? I don't understand it.
Well, if you consider that Mr. Brown was instilled with thoughts about being a have-not from some of the people around him, and his neighborhood seemed to be that type of neighborhood, the removal of opportunities to, if you will, step up from that economic opportunity, all the manufacturing stuff left where all these people were moving to, it becomes, if you will, and not all of Ferguson, because I worked over there, but it becomes if you will, a cauldron of have-nots in a sense, and more of that than opportunities. But the grand jury, I did not expect to bring an indictment of the police officer because of the circumstances of, there was an altercation.
Is the frustration with the grand jury came up with the wrong decision and therefore we're going to protest that? Or is the frustration a broader issue? And I hope it's the second and not the first, not because grand juries always come down with the right, either they deliver a bill or they don't, but that's our system.
It's a long-term resolution that was being sought for, and that is that folks have been, in their mind's eye, bypassed by the jurisprudence and also by economic opportunity for so long. And was a chance to just raise hell.
Or I said, it's not Ferguson, it's the Galleria, it's the West County Shopping Mall. How do you sort of react when you see that sort of stuff? Do you say, good for them, go get it?
I do. But you don't have to tear down somebody else's house to complain about the leaking water in yours. You don't have to do that. And I've lived in leaking houses, and I've driven multi-year cars that need lots of repairs, but I've never stolen somebody else's car or damaged somebody else's car to make mine work.
I understand if there's a message, a broader message, if there is an agenda that says we want to make change in relationships, whether it's between law enforcement and minorities, if that's really what the agenda is, then sometimes it takes a lot of disruptive, non-destructive protesting to ratchet up the heat far enough to get people to take it seriously.
Do you think we know what the agenda is at this point?
I'm afraid I don't. That's part of when we started this conversation, I said, I'm very confused because I'm not hearing what the agenda is. And I'm concerned about that.
But you are.
I don't know fully, even though I've read a lot, talked with a lot of people, some with names that would be considered leadership in St. Louis. But the answers for change is bigger, deeper than that. It's economics. For all that care to pay attention to my few words, it's economics.
Okay, we'll continue our conversation here with a separate group of folks. I'll introduce first Daniel McFarland from Diversify Us. Welcome back to the show. We were just talking entrepreneurship, and this very issue really kind of, they came together in last week's show. Rita Ford, welcome back. Gravois Park Neighborhood Association President. We appreciate you coming back. And also Ed Bryant, welcome back. St. Louis Minority Business Council President, CEO. Let's just real quickly bounce off of what we just heard there. I saw you nodding, Ed, when he said it's all economics. Yeah, that's in your title almost.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was interesting listening to the former panel, because I think Brittany kind of brought a really good context there, that it's not only about the criminal justice issues, it's about all those underlying issues that have lingered for a very long time. And when you have a system where economic equity is not really a part of the conversation about how we grow our economy, then you have these lingering things that are there that just aren't articulated until something triggers it. And from
some people might hear that and think that you're saying certain folks need extra help to start a business or something, and that's not fair. That kind of rubs people the wrong way.
No, the way I look at it is that if we want our region's economy to grow, then everyone should be a part of it. And when you look at the demographics of our nation and as well as of our region and other states, we are becoming increasingly more a minority majority country. St. Louis kind of lags in some other regions, but my perspective is that we've been focusing so much a lot of times on trying to cut up an existing pie, but if we realize that equity is a growth strategy, then we should be trying to grow the pie and grow opportunities for everybody else. And so it's about finding ways to be more inclusive, to include lots of different other ideas and other people that just have not been included in the economy.
I'm thinking back to a previous show on this topic. Reverend Starsky Wilson, who's on the Ferguson Commission, co-chairing it, he said on here, if we don't get this right, St. Louis will be known for the Arch and for Ferguson. The Arch might be in second place right now. What do you say to somebody who says it's time to move on?
Well, I certainly would agree that we need to move to a new place. I don't think that we need to just be known as a place that's angry and not simply as a place that has a big icon on its riverfront. I mean, we need to be known for more than that. I think it's an opportunity for us to be known for more than that as we pursue ways to engage more diverse populations in our economic process. And I think we can do that. And I think we need to look at it not as simply something that is a good thing just because it would help somebody else, but that it's actually good for the companies that do it, to have diverse perspectives, enables them to reach diverse populations with their products and services, and gives them a broader perspective in the decisions that they make. And actually, I think that companies that pursue diversity and inclusion, so including diverse populations, are actually benefited themselves. And I think there are studies that show that they are benefited. You have better retention rates for employees as you engage people and connect more people. You have the opportunity to gain newer and broader perspectives as people are included. It's not just about doing something that's good just to say, well, we just want to include you even though you bring nothing to the table. I believe that these people that come from different perspectives help the companies that bring them in.
Okay, kind of sticking with the economics here, let's talk about the malls again for a second. You know, for some folks that was a brief civil disobedience, it was a momentary interruption to bring something to other people's minds. I saw some folks really kind of scared when they saw folks come into the mall and start chanting. What did you think when you saw the mall shut down?
Well,
Briefly,
actually, I want to go back before then.
Okay.
I want to go back the night of the
grand jury?
Grand jury, I'm sorry, thank you. I want to go back to that night because I was actually watching a football game and they announced that it was going to come on at 8 o'clock. They're going to make the announcement at 8 o'clock. First thing that went to my mind, why would they wait so late at night to announce that? And where were the National Guards? That's the first thing that came to my mind before they even got to the mall. I'm thinking Jay Nixon dropped the ball on this one. I think if he had them in place, I think if the business were, it was a frightening thing. I tell you this, I actually cried one moment when I saw that going on. Then the next time I saw other things going on there, I actually got angry. Because, as the gentleman said earlier, you don't have to burn and destroy other properties to make your point. There's a proper way to do anything. This was not a way to get your point across. And to me, it was an embarrassment, to be honest with you. You know, I saw a lot of diversity there in the protests and what have you, but there's still embarrassment, not just for me, but for the city of St. Louis, for the city of Ferguson. And as far as the companies coming together, let me just say this, and that's the bottom line, the basics. I really believe we're talking about big businesses, small businesses, but a lot of this comes from home training, bringing up your children, taking responsibility, making them accountable, making the parents accountable. We have to start from basics. It takes a village. It takes a village. And you're gonna have to start from basics. You wanna reach out to these children, you wanna do something with them, you got to teach them what's important, what to look for. You know, I think I heard somebody say something about Michael Brown graduated from high school, and that was unheard of for an 18-year-old African American. It's in your circles unheard of, because every one of my nieces and nephews, great nieces and nephews, have graduated, went on to college, did military, and did something positive. So you don't have to get into that mold, that frame of mind. I will say this very quickly. There are so many ways we can reach out to these children. This is where it starts. Even before you get to the businesses, it starts with the children. We have a program that I'm very proud to be on that board. It's called NAB, Neighborhood Accountability Board. And we work with the juvenile officers and the juvenile court system to try to put these kids in place. If you get a kid that goes into a mall and get caught shoplifting, a kid that's on a bus getting into a fight, if I can change that child's life to keep him from picking up a gun one day, I think I've done a very good job. It takes and you got to start from the beginning. We can talk about the mall, we can talk about the governor, but it starts at the bottom, start from the cradle. And I strongly believe in that.
So is there a wide spectrum of viewpoints within the African American community when we talk about these subjects? We're talking about painting a lot of broad brushstrokes, and you're talking about disagreeing with some things you've heard on here. Is there a wide diversity of opinion?
Well, I mean, there's a wide diversity of opinion because we're people, not because we're African American,
right.
Part of the African American community. I mean, I think our opinions are diverse because of who we are and because of our backgrounds and everything.
I guess I'm just thinking of the idea. It was a leading question to some degree because so much of this has kind of come down to sides, and it just feels like if we're going to get anywhere productive, it can't be about sides.
Well, I think that we're in a and I guess I've been thinking that this is sort of a confluence situation where a lot of things have kind of come together, you know, that and it took these certain situations, whether it was the shooting of Mike Brown or the shooting of or the killing of Eric Garner, that and the grand jury decisions have basically kind of pulled the top off of some things that have just been there for a while, and certain parts of the community have felt that they've been unheard and unlistened to, and now we have we have your attention. You know, it's time to talk. Let's have this conversation. Now, it's going back and forth. There is going to be anger and some shouting and some activity, but you know, we're all kind of coming at it from where we come at it from. So, you know, I look at it, to your point, that it isn't an either or, that it's about kids or it's about business. It's about how do we articulate the community that we want to create, and not just respond to this situation, but begin to aspire to where we want to be and what we want to be. And now we've been doing planning and aspiring, but it's only been certain part of the community that's been a part of that conversation. Now it's like, okay, now everyone's aware that the community is a lot more diverse, and there are a lot of different opinions, and that some of them have been quiet and nascent, but now you understand that there's actually more to us, and there's more to other people. And so I look at it from, I actually polled a lot of my minority business enterprises today just to kind of get their perspectives on what they thought was going on and how they felt and how their businesses were being impacted. Almost unanimously, all of them were sad. I mean, their emotions went all over the place. They were sad, they were angry, they were kind of reminiscing back to 1992 to 1969 or whatever, you know, depending on their age. But there was sort of this unanimous kind of here we go again, or here we are again, but maybe now they'll hear us.
So we've had challenges that we could consider opportunities before.
Exactly.
She just mentioned the anniversary of Rosa Parks.
Mm-hmm.
Have we not made any progress? Have we not? I don't know.
I think we've made some progress.
Sure.
Sure we have.
Sure.
Sure we have made
Sure.
some progress. And again, I'm going to stay back on this because I really believe you said communities. We do, and like I said, it does take a village. But when you start off on this, as far as I'm concerned, you said communities. Communities mean business, means family, mean a whole group of, like I said, it takes a village. Mm-hmm. And if you have the businesses that you have, and you have those people, those families together, it speaks volume, really. When you think about the children, we all trying to reach out and help. It starts from. I still think it starts at home. You have to hold parents accountable. And I'll tell you something, and I'm an old woman here, and I tell you what. And,
we reserve the right to disagree.
But I'm up in age. However, I see things a lot different than maybe this young man might see things. You are a young man, but I see things a lot different than he might see things. Because when I came up, we went to school. When I came up, we respected authority figures. We respected the police. We respected the school teachers. And that has gotten away from families, I believe. We don't respect authorities. And you know it's true.
I agree. I do. I definitely agree. One thing I would, maybe it's a nuanced difference, but when we say it takes a village, and what are we saying? Are we saying it takes a city to raise our children?
No, it takes everybody in the community.
The point I want to make, though, is that when we say it takes a village, I think, you know, when we look at our city and the various hamlets and whatnot that comprise the area, that we do have. That's the problem. We have cities raising our children. You know, we have the police and law enforcement and the laws who are participating in raising the children because they're not really being raised well, at least at home. Because I don't believe that the issue is that it doesn't take a city. It takes a family. It takes a loving group that is concerned with the well-being of a child. Because you're not raising. A farmer doesn't raise corn seed. A farmer raises grown corn that can grow. And I think we spend too much time trying to coddle and not enough time actually trying to develop healthy, well-balanced, self-sustaining people that can contribute to society. And I agree with. So I know that's what you mean, but when we say it takes us a village, I just.
Well, what I mean by that, let me just. That's okay. That's okay. But what I'm saying is, when I say it takes a village, it goes all to different directions. I don't mean, I just mean it takes. When I say maybe, then you've heard that term before. I'm sure you have. But what I'm saying is, it does take a lot of different things to get going, to people to come together, and like I said, it's going to start with, like you said, a brick house is a brick house, but you can turn that into a home with family and nurturing and what have you.
This is probably a good time to hear from some young people about what they have to think about this.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Anne-Marie Berger did just that with some young adults, I should say.
The last time we met, it was shortly after Mike Brown was killed in August, and now we're meeting again shortly after the no indictment from the grand jury. How are you all feeling? What's going through your mind right now?
I told you.
Yeah, we knew. We already knew, but it still hurt my feelings that it was no indictment. It's not worth going to trial.
I have no hate in my heart for anybody, but at this point, like, I'm so pissed and I'm so fed up that it's like I can't take it anymore. Like, I really can't take the stuff that's going on in St. Louis. Like, I can't.
Yeah,
I can't.
People just shouldn't be afraid of the police, you know, and the police shouldn't, you know, I'm not telling them to not protect themselves. Obviously, you know, it's a dangerous job, and I have family members that's policemen. I understand it, but over general consensus, it's not an amicable relationship.
Wednesday is when it really hit me. Like, I just saw different videos of like police brutality against people, and we were driving to the grocery store to go get some things for Thanksgiving, and I just broke down and started crying because it was like all of this stuff just like really hit me hard. Like, this is really happening, and there's nothing we can do about it. From that moment on Wednesday, I felt like I can't really enjoy my life if I'm not putting something towards the fight. Like, I can't enjoy the job that I have. I can't enjoy the new car that I have. Like, I can't enjoy any of that without feeling like I put something towards the fight.
And what is the fight?
It's so broad, like, it's so many things. It's mass incarceration, it's structural racism, it's police brutality, it's government accountability, it's a lot of things, and then we have to figure out, you know, which thing we want to get to first.
What's the point of shutting down malls?
Money talks. It's like how we're going to get them to listen.
That's why they don't care about most of our communities, because we don't have a lot of money, so they don't really care about what happens to us half the time. But if you mess with money in Clayton and Ladue and Chesterfield, then they might start to listen.
It's not business as usual. That's how people want us to go about it, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to say, okay, this happened, the system works, it's business as usual, Black Friday. No.
So it's like, yeah, it's an inconvenience. It's a first world problem we're dealing with because you can't shop today.
What about to those that criticize that there are people who work paycheck to paycheck?
I'm one of those people.
And
I'm one of those people, and I might not be able to pay my cell phone bill, but some stuff is more important. When we talk about Mike Brown, it's about all of that. Like, it's even about the schools and about how we still have those issues going on. And
well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that disparity of education. How important of a role does that play?
The most.
It starts from school.
Yeah.
Starts from
our
school.
neighborhoods and our schools.
I shouldn't be an anomaly because I could read and write. In 2014 in America, where I'm from, being average is making it. You know what I mean? Because everybody's just struggling, just getting by, struggling and getting by until we die. That's all people are doing on my side of town.
Let me ask you this, and like put the onus on you. You all are, you know, successful, young adults that have great futures ahead of you. Do you have a responsibility? Do you feel like there's something you can do for those younger generations who don't have role models of people that look like them?
It's definitely a responsibility, just reaching out and just talking to them.
Before I got to where I am, I didn't know anybody who took my path. All the people that I know are like the oldest people that I know who really like walked the same path as me. That's not like, wasn't like my grandparents' age. They might be like 35, but that's not old.
Well, so you know how important it is for, you know, a 13-year-old
and like
young black kid to see you, to
and
talk
that's,
to
and
you,
so
to
that's what I'm
interact
saying.
with you.
I can't go hide.
I'm hearing that possibly we've created more of a divide between blacks and whites in St. Louis.
It's not creating a divide if it's already there.
Right, but is it worse? Is it we taking steps backwards?
Because people, I rather they tell me. So now that I see how people feel, I like that better. Thank you.
At least it's out in the open.
At least it's out in the open.
I don't know, like people, like when we went out, I've been a couple places, and you could just feel like a couple of days after, I felt people looking at me. You could feel people's energy, you know what I mean? Like you could feel it, like you could look at people and kind of see almost how they feel about it.
When you see white people, what do you think?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Lately this week, because I worked in a few upscale environments, so the white people I look at lately, like the past few weeks, is what do you think of me? Are you racist?
I think that's what it is.
Are you judging me? You know, are you looking right through me, or are you looking at me as a person, or do you just see me as just something else?
I mean, people just gotta care. That's what it comes down to.
Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about people, I'm talking about everybody. I'm talking about not just racist white people, angry black people, people in general. When you look at another person, you have to care.
And see a human being.
I know when this first happened, at least for me personally, it was hard for me to find a place. Like, what role do I play? As a young female, as a daughter, as a Mexican American, as a student, what role do I play in this fight? And I find it just by speaking up, by having this dialogue with other people of different backgrounds. I haven't given up on individuals. I like to have that dialogue, even though we may not agree. For a moment in time, you were listening to what I'm saying and what I'm feeling, and
vice versa.
And vice versa.
Let's end with what has made you smile, or what has made you feel good? What has been something throughout this process since, let's say, since last Monday?
I guess what has come out of all of this is definitely unity, because people are actually coming together now and accomplishing things.
That we've awakened the sleeping giant, that people are talking about this, that there is national coverage, that there is people sitting around the table and actually looking, is there a race issue? Is there a police brutality issue? Is there a world issue? America is not necessarily as perfect as it is painted out to be. So I think that even though a lot of negativity has come from it, a lot of media coverage that isn't so positive has come out of it, I believe that we are moving towards something good throughout all this ugliness. I believe that discussion is the beginning of it.
Change gonna come.
I think you guys had like a little bit of a sigh there at the end when she said change is going to come. Is it going to come? Is there some hope in what we just heard from those young folks?
Oh, sure.
I think it has
Change
to
is
come.
gonna come.
Yeah, I do too.
And I'm not setting you up for like a Pollyanna answer here. I want to know. If you don't think so, say so.
Well, something's going to change. I think that you break the ground like this, you're going to something's going to pop up. Hopefully, it's not weeds. I think we have an opportunity to grow something good because so much has happened. So yes, I think change is going to come. But what is the change, and can we shape it?
I think one of the things that's going to be a great change that'll happen because of this is municipal court reform. That's needed to happen for a long time. There's way too many communities that have to rely on that revenue coming in. And I don't blame the police, by the way. I blame the elected officials for forcing the police officers. You want a pay raise, you have to write more tickets. You want to keep your job, you have to write more tickets. That really happens whether or not people believe that or not. Now, do I think it's racially motivated? No, but it happens to be that this happens in the communities that are poor. They don't have enough tax revenue coming in, traditional tax revenue coming in. So that's why you see the concentrated ticket writing and speed cameras in those areas, is to generate revenue to keep that city going.
You know, one judge, Frank Vatterott, admitted that he got fired at St. Anne. He was their municipal judge because he wasn't bringing enough ticket revenue in. And, you know, I got this ticket from Moline Acres as a speeding camera ticket, and took it to the Supreme Court on Tuesday. We'll see how they rule on that. But one of the things about the ticket was you could either pay the fine or you could contest it. And it said on the ticket, if you contest this, you'll have to pay all court costs. So pay the fine or exercise your constitutional rights to challenge your government and pay up. So you're a loser either
So it's
way.
about money is what you're saying either way.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think I found something I can absolutely agree with both of you guys on, that reform certainly needs to happen. But we can't be afraid to recognize how closely tied economic injustice and racial injustice has been in this country since its founding, right? And so we can't pretend like it's not mostly people of color suffering under those systems. And so this is why I was saying earlier, there has to be a both and. We have to pay attention to the policing issues and the distrust that brought people out to the streets in the first place, but we have to pay attention to larger aspects of systemic injustice in this society, and we can't be afraid to name race as an issue because it is.
I mean, that's why I think that, when you asked the initial question, or is a hopeful situation, and I think it is, because as I was speaking earlier, that I think we've kind of, there are a lot of other things happening in our region with planning efforts and what have you, with collective impact efforts around early child education and what have you, where I think we have a unique opportunity in St. Louis to remake and rebuild ourselves. And we're at the table. We're all having conversations about why do we have 91 municipalities? Why do we do this? Why do we do this? We're asking a lot of why questions. And those should transition into how questions and into what questions. And I'm hopeful that I think that we have I think a moment to get this right. And I agree with Starsky. I think we have this moment to get this right. Let's stay at the table and get it right. Because 50 years from now, if we don't get it right, we're going to get left behind.
So I see how we can change the municipal court issue. That's voting and legislators and things of that nature. But how do you change what the young man was saying in the piece there, that he feels like as an African-American young man, he's being looked at differently now? He feels this tension in the air, or the kind of the preteen shoppers I saw running from protesters in the mall because they were just flat scared. And I'm not passing any judgment on them or any of them, the folks.
Well, I think we have to figure out ways to enable people to cross out of their normal social circles and interact with people in other groups. I mean,
Is there a will to do that? Do people?
I think honestly there is a growing will, right? I think that has to do with this moment. I've spoken to so many people from so many different backgrounds and said, look, I didn't realize that your students were feeling this way. I didn't realize that anybody in my community was feeling this way, because honestly, this is the first time I've ever been to Ferguson. This is the first time I've ever been to North County. And I just really didn't know, right? And so I think that there is now a level of awareness, and that is an opportunity, to your point, that we have to seize, because I think people are much more willing to have the conversation, but we have to have honest conversations and we have to have constructive conversations.
And we can't have those until the anger stops. You cannot have a constructive conversation with anybody until the anger piece is over.
Or does it take conversation for the anger to
Well, I think
subside?
the anger is going to subside eventually, is what I think is going to happen, and then we're going to figure out how we can fix this.
Well, I don't think the anger itself needs to go away. It needs to be channeled constructively. I don't think
Not
that
into destructive.
Exactly. So I think that the destruction would need to stop. But to say that you shouldn't be angry, as if should I be satisfied and we pursue changes? You won't pursue changes if we all feel good. We have to acknowledge there's a problem and that it bothers us, and that bothering, whether you want to call it anger or not, that is the kind of thing that needs to motivate us toward change.
But if we don't funnel that anger, it's going to turn to resentment. And when it turns to resentment, it's over at that point, and then we just get farther apart.
Well, if you ignore it, I mean, if you act like you're not angry, that's the kind of thing that leads to resentment.
But I think we're at the point we have to pull the plug on the violence piece. We've got to get behind that. And exactly right. I mean, the public, they've had enough of this. Seeing some of the video of shoppers being chased through the aisles by so-called peaceful protesters, that's got to end.
But we can't forget that people went to the streets in the first place because there was an unarmed 18-year-old that was dead and laid on the ground for 4.5 hours. We just can't pretend like people are out there frustrated and upset for no reason, right? People are in New York City right now for the same reason, because on video we saw a man be choked to death and there's been no justice. And so if we are going to talk about frustration, we have to be willing to be honest about the frustration on both sides and where it comes from, and actually, to your point, work through that instead of ignore it by just focusing on one sensationalized story.
Were we acting like we weren't angry before?
Well, I think, I don't mean to interrupt, so we can jump right in. I'm going to jump right in.
Do.
I don't understand the thing about the anger thing. Now, both of those incidents, New York and here in Ferguson, when you think about those, you have to be realistic about what happened here as well. Why did it happen? And then we may be telling yourself maybe you should be angry, or maybe you should not be angry. But you have to be at least be having some sort of sense to know that this could have been avoided, both incidents. So we have to say what went wrong here to cause this to lose a life. So this is what I'm trying to understand. What did it take to get from point A to point B? Whether the guy was black, Asian, or Hispanic. What I'm saying is leave race out of it for just a second, and let's go with what did it take to get from point A to point B?
Let me ask you something. I'll direct this to the chief. I don't want to take your role, Casey, but if police officers knew more of the people that they patrol, would some of these incidents be eliminated?
I think some of them would be, but you're never going to completely eliminate that. There will be more Michael Brown situations. This will continue. And we talk about justice. Justice is subjective. I think there's a lot of people that says in the Darren Wilson case, justice was served, and there's a lot of people that said, no, it wasn't. So it really depends what perspective. But one thing that I can almost guarantee you is that New York officer and that Ferguson officer did not go to work that day and say, I'm going to kill a young black man. That did not happen. That wasn't in their minds. So how did we get there?
That's what
If you saw the video in New York, which I saw the video many times, is they say you're under arrest, get your hands off of me, is how, and it went downhill from there. It's tragic it ended in his death, but it didn't have to. Just like Michael Brown, it didn't have to end that way. So how do we get our young people to go, hey, listen, if a police officer says you need to get up on the sidewalk or you need to submit, you may not agree with the arrest, but this isn't where you argue it, how do we stop the fight before it starts?
So is that are you teaching respect for authority, or are you training them that they should be scared of authority?
Not scared of authority. That's not what I'm talking about. But there has to be authority in this country, or we have anarchy.
There absolutely does have to be authority, but that authority also needs to a point that you've actually made, right, and to the point that you made, Charlie, that authority also needs to know and respect the community in which it serves, right?
Agree 100%.
And so I certainly agree with you that it was avoidable. But in what setting and in what moment was it avoidable is a question that I don't believe that I can answer, but I certainly know that we've seen this happen time and time again, and it's been entirely too frequent. Young people are tired of making other young people into hashtags. Young people are tired of saying there's another one and there's another one. And when I talked to an 8-year-old, I asked him, what is the first thing that you think when you see a police officer? And he said, run. His 5-year-old cousin hid behind his white female teacher and as a police officer walked up and said, I need you to protect me because the police are coming and I don't feel safe. So we have to deal with the fact that there is an internalization of that fear, right, and that lack of safety, and that's not coming from no place. And so there are conversations on both sides of this to have, but we can't pretend like our children are not scared for no reason.
It's funny, Sam, because Brittany, Alvin Reed said on Donnybrook tonight that every community wants more police officers. I don't know if he's right or not, but that's what he said.
Hold that thought, and then you can have my role on the post show. I'm gladly. Stay tuned.9net.org because you'll do a better job.
No way.
Thanks, everyone.
African-American
We're back. Go ahead.
Oh, my question is, does a young African-American boy or girl want to be a police officer today?
Well, I can tell you this: my 6-year-old son dressed up as one for Halloween. So I know one, and he's African. Is that not clear that he's African? Okay.
Because I thought there might be a stigma to the profession, and that some people growing up in largely African-American neighborhoods might say, don't want to go to the.
I know a lot of police officers. I work with a lot of police officers, African Americans and white. And I have not had, I have one officer who just happens to be a white officer, and he is always going to these kids while he's patrolling, handing out coloring books to African American kids. Hey, I know one officer in particular, I don't know if I can mention his name, but anyway, I know one officer in particular who encouraged a young black child to grow up to be an officer, and he's very proud of this kid. So you can feed back and forth. I think, first of all, we're making too much of a race issue out of it. Personally, that's my opinion.
Well,
this is not about.
But I want to come back to Charlie's the question: did he want to be police officers? And I'm going to push that. It's not whether or not the kids want to be police officers. I want the kids to want to be whatever they want to be.
That's right.
Whatever they want to be. I want them to aspire to be whatever they want to be.
Oh, I know, but
and if it's
I only raise that because I thought some people believe that if the police force reflects the community, it'll better serve.
But it also includes the possibility of being a police officer. And it includes all of those things, because I think that one of the issues that we have is that we have this, we need to try to create in some ways some kind of economic dividend within, or an equity dividend within our communities. Right now, African American wages are lower than white wages. African American unemployment is higher than black employment. It's higher than white employment. So, it's not a race thing. But when you look at the data,
I'm saying it's not all race things.
But when you look at the data,
put it out there like it's all about race. With this protest, it's not all about race. You have thousands of people out in the streets, in the malls, where you were going, over on South Grant, which is in the area where I live, and I couldn't go down that block, down that street, and it was a diverse people out there. There were African American, black, Hispanics, and everything else out there on Grand Avenue. So I don't think it became a race issue at that time. it became a race issue when Michael Brown was shot, who happened to be black, by a white officer. That's when it became a race issue. To me, it is.
The back fence conversation we had with the two gentlemen who are friends and disagree, but they're neighbors. One of them had made the point that this is our system. This was the decision, right or wrong. This is our system. Is it? Does everyone feel that it's our system, or do some people feel like they're not part of that system?
But I think to your latter point, a lot of people don't feel like they're a part of that system, right? And so if you go and you read the new Jim Crow and you hear Michelle Alexander talk about this, there are some very clear statistical reasons why people don't feel like this is a system that favors them. And this is why I keep coming back to honest conversations, right? Because it's one thing to get more deeply ingrained in what we already believe. It's another thing to present how people are honestly feeling and say, how do we get after the root causes of why folks are feeling that way on all sides of this issue? And so there are a lot of people who feel like this justice system is not built for them, and there's statistical data to back up why, right? So when we look at the war on drugs and we look at the fact that drugs that are more prevalent in African American communities are actually punished with harsher sentences than drugs that are more prevalent in white communities, that's a disparity that we have to pay attention to, right? And so we have to honestly talk about those things and not skirt away from it because race is uncomfortable.
And the biggest conversation stopper is for someone to say, you shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Precisely.
You know,
It's
you shouldn't feel that way.
invalidating.
It invalidates you as a person, as a human being. And it's like these kind of conversations, like, I mean, so like the anger, I agree with your point. It's like, it's okay for us to be uncomfortable.
Intelligent people can disagree.
Yeah.
Let's agree on this. There are going to be some people that you'll never get off their belief that Darren Wilson was absolutely justified, okay? And then there's folks that say that was first-degree murder. You'll never change probably either side's mind, no matter how much evidence you put in front of them, no matter how much discussion. So agree to that, okay? Now how do we move on from here? Intelligent people can disagree. So how do we fix this? How do we repair the relationship? How do we move forward? That's going to be the biggest challenge.
Yeah. I think the biggest way to improve a lot of this is education, what Brittany's doing. I think that if you can succeed in getting people out of high school and then after 4 years of college, the stats show the money comes.
At the end of the day, there's probably more that we agree upon than we disagree upon. And I think that's why I keep getting back to this issue. We have to have a conversation that articulates what a good community looks like for all of us in this region, for everyone in the region. And that's, and I think that's what I think this opportunity is going to provide us is what is the good society, what is the beloved community, as Dr. King called it, look like for St. Louis. Safety, justice, peace, equity, all those things. And I think those are things we all want.
And I think that we all want our society to be a place where your zip code, your race, your educational background does not determine your outcomes.
Exactly.
That's true equity, and I think that's what we can all agree that we want.
Or at the very least, isn't a very accurate predictor, as we've
Exactly.
discussed here.